Thank you, everyone. So today I'll be talking about clustering analysis of 3D geophysical models from the metal earth transects. So I originally with the metal earth, I was involved with the seismic things, seismic acquisition and processing and modeling, all that. And lately I've started working with data analytics with the 3D models. So I will be today talking about how I analyze this 3D models that we're generating from all our transects and try to come up with some clustering and methods that can be useful for prospectivity analysis for the mineral prospectivity. So I start in here. So just an introduction here. We all know the Metal Earth project aims to answer fundamental questions related to differential metal endowment. So for this end, we are collecting several types of data, geological, geochemical, and geophysical methods. And all these things can help to kind of shed light on what are the differences between metal endowed, less endowed, and barren areas that on the surface, they look pretty much similar. And as we all know, all these analyses right now are carried on the Superior Province, on two sub-provinces, Abitibi and Wabigoon. So for data analytic purposes, that the 3D data that we are talking about and we are focused on it, there are 3D density, resistivity, and susceptibility models. And these are from all transects from Abitibi and Wabigoon. And just clarifying that we'll get the density from gravity, and resistivity models are generated from our magnetotelluric surveys, and susceptibility models are inverted from magnetic surveys that Geological Survey of Canada has online, and everybody can use them. So what they did in here, we did some clustering and correlation analysis of 3D geophysical models. This will require some kind of data pre-processing, making sure everything comes on the grid, which I'll go through and explain how this is all done. And again, if we are hoping that this can give us insights into physical processes leading to metal endowment. So the 3D geophysical models that we have in here have been used by data analytic people for mineral prospectivity types. On my side, I'll be mostly focusing on these 3D models and how I generated them and what I'm thinking by just looking at these geophysical models, what I think can be inferred from the data. So here is our study area. This is the Superior Province. All these black lines that you see, these are our transects. Pretty much our seismic lines followed all these black lines, and I have their names written under there. And this side is the Abitibi sub-province, and on this end is the Wabigoon sub-province. And these are the lithological map under there that we have some simple notation here for a geophysicist in a way to know what are the different colors represent. Anywhere you see pink, that's like a felsic intrusive, and you see a purple one, mafic intrusive, and any yellow and green colors, those are volcanic, with respectively felsic and metavolcanic, and gray and oranges are usually sedimentary units. So just flipping between these two, again here I'm highlighting the Abitibi transects, all that, and on this side is the Wabigoon. And the whole purpose of this thing, the Abitibi considered as a very metal endowed and very, for mineral perspective, very good sub-province. But the Wabigoon seems a little bit kind of barren, which is still debatable, but people trying to understand what's the major difference between these two sub-provinces. So today I will show you results from these transects that inside the blue ones. I have completed the analysis for the Shibugamu 2, but it's too far away to be included side by side with some of those other ones. So all these transects, Shibugamu, Royan, Larder Lake, Cobalt, Matheson, and Swayze, their analysis are completed. On the Wabigoon side, Sturgeon, Atikokan, Dryden, and Rainy River are completed. The only transects that are still to be worked on is the Geraldton, Malartic, and Sudbury. So we started the 3D gravity inversion that gives us a density model. So usually we get a gravity model. This is available with the Geological Survey of Canada. And along all our transect, we collected our own gravity stations, but they will be pretty much following a very narrow, like a line along the transect, which in a 3D inversion, they will be like ignorable. So I will claim that all these density models that we generate in here is mostly relies on the Geological Survey of Canada's available gravity, Bouguer gravity anomaly map. So all these inversions, of course, take lots of time and effort to invert them. So the 3D density models were provided by these researchers here. Rajesh Wire did some of them. Alan King from Geoscience North provided some of them. And I personally, for a few of them that we didn't have, I did myself, like with some software, try to invert the 3D inversion to get 3D density models. So here, there's a Matheson, we have a bigger inversion, and I sometimes like just crop the area that I'm interested and I want to analyze. Moving on, this is for the 3D Magnetotelluric inversions. This is gonna generate us the resistivity models, 3D resistivity model. This is an example again from Matheson. So for consistency, I will be showing all these steps that I'm with the Matheson transect. So you can see the grid comes like there's very wide grid spacing on the outside of the thing, and you get closer to the area, those grids getting smaller. And then I'm now zooming in this area and I'm showing the model just on that corner. So lots of these cropping and focusing of the models happens during this analysis to be able to get the 3D model that I'm interested and have overlap with the other ones. So you can see here, these are black dots show the station of the magnetotelluric station that we have. You can see they're pretty much aligned along the lines. It's in a sense, it's not really covering the surface, but the nature of magnetotelluric data and inversion, usually, as long as you have some kind of decent spread on the stations, you should be able to generate a 3D model out of there. It wouldn't be the best, ideal one. For the ideal ones, it would be better to have the surface uniformly covered with the stations, but we have lots of restrictions on that, and that would be a very expensive survey to do. But nevertheless, these 3D models was provided again by our researchers in the Metal Earth, Ademola Adetunji, Eric Roots, Graham Hill, and Phil Wanamaker. These are the people that did the 3D inversions for the magnetotelluric data and provided us the 3D resistivity models. The 3D magnetic inversion, this is again, these are all inverted from the Geological Survey of Canada's magnetic map, magnetic anomaly map, and all of these done by Alan King, and that has donated us all these 3D models from the Geoscience North. And in fact, one of the good things with these inversions are all of them done with the same parameters. I cannot say the same things with the MT and the gravity because different researchers done it, but the magnetic inversion, all of them uniformly done with the same parameters, which that's also I think it's a good thing all the inversion be done by basic and simple kind of constant parameterization. That would be a good thing for data analytics. So these are the areas. So I have those data that I showed. Let's say the red one is my gravity, blue one is resistivity, and the green area is my susceptibility. So I'm interested to really find overlap between these models and just crop the areas that they think overlap. So by looking at these things, you can see my magnetic inversion, which goes till the depths of 7.5 kilometers. It pretty much restricts all the common area. So I will be most likely in this survey trying to just crop the data to the extent of my magnetic and then start doing my analysis. Going there, so original grid of density, our density models, they're usually on a 2 kilometer grid, 2 by 2 kilometer horizontally, and even vertically, as they go deeper, they get even bigger, like 2, 3, 4 kilometers distance. But again, I take those grids and whatever the values of the gravity anomaly is there, and I regularize and interpolate in a way, resample it into a regular grid. And I call it interpolated here. That's the same grid in here that interpolated in here. I picked for all these models to be on a 500 meter by 500 and 500 meter grid, which means my horizontal X, Y, they're all 500 meter intervals. And also my vertical, the depth sampling is also done in a 500 meter. This has been done after several try and errors, and I find the 500 meter to be most representative of our models. So doing that, I generate this interpolated density model, the 3D model that I will have here. Going to the resistivity, you realize we have this irregular, like a structure kind of sampling. No matter what, I again interpolate and resample this thing to the same 500 by 500 interval on the horizontal and vertical, and I get this grid. And do the same for susceptibility. You realize our susceptibilities are in a smaller grid, there's finer, so I'm pretty much upsampling this one in this case. And once all of these things done, I have all my models. Now they're all on the exact same locations, and they're sitting right on the top of each other. Even like for a start, for origin of these models, I choose the multiples of 500 in every survey. So that way, if in the future I needed to mix all my models from different transects together, I will be consistent and then they will be matching to each other easily. So once all these the 3D models are generated, they're sitting on the same grid, they have the same number of points and everything. All I need to do, I normalize those values between 0 and 1. So the density values here, no matter what they are, I find the minimum and maximum, and I make sure that every value in here will be normalized between 0 and 1. For the density, I do on their absolute density value, whatever in the model. But for resistivity and susceptibility, to get a meaningful representations, we have to do these normalization on the log 10 values. In fact, even like when we plot these resistivity and susceptibility values, we always plot them in a logarithmic scale. So for the clustering analysis, I recommend to do these in a normalization on log 10 values. So I have cubes of normalized density that's going to be 0 to 1, resistivity 0 to 1 again, and susceptibility 0 to 1. And I take all these values and I make this 3D cube that has now axes for normalized density, normalized susceptibility, and normalized resistivity. And I will see how all these points spread in here. And the whole task starts from here. Is there any meaningful correlation or relationship or clustering happening here that I can figure them out, and then I can cluster them and I come back and project them back to their special locations. So for clustering, there's many methods and there's lots of research on how to do the best clustering analysis. And there's many methods to cluster data. They can be based on connectivity, density, distribution, centroid, or correlation. So for these research, I use two basic ones. The k-means, this is the most known and the most understood centroid-based method, which uses the the centroid-based, like mean values, and finds the clustering around the mean value. And ORCLUS, I found this one from a thesis from the Colorado School of Mines, Mello, 2018, and they really find this one to be helpful in the resistivity and density models for the synthetic data that generated. It's called the arbitrarily oriented projected cluster generation. So for all these models or anything I will talk, I applied these two. So you can see here the k-means clustering. I use the four-group, the cluster informant that generates this one. If I apply the ORCLUS clustering, I generate this cluster. So you can see that they colored based on different colors. Once I did this thing, I also decided, because it was hard to really find the relation between them, I did some other method that I call median segmentation. So in this way, I find a median value on the normalized susceptibility or normalized resistivity and normalized density, and I just divide the data on like a high and low based on that median value, and end up generating 8 clusters, different colors that you will see here, which I find like it's more like easy to interpret in a way, find a meaningful relationship between them. But I still have lots of hope for these clusters and how they kind of correlate with this median values. So here, the K-means clustering, we are now looking at the density as resistivity from 2 different directions. You can see how these clustering work, the susceptibility and density. It looks like it's that the K-means is doing a good job of separating these in here, and the resistivity versus susceptibility. So it's hard to see these in 3D, so I'm just putting in the 2D projections in here to see the clusters. This is how ORCLUS clustering doing this. Again, these are all for Matheson dataset, and you can see it's way different looking, and the kind of clusters that comes out of the ORCLUS is different. And here is my median value clustering. So here, every color will have a very constant meaning. So anything below 4 would be low density, and above 4 would be a high density value. So any cluster in that. And then all the other colors will have their meanings, which I will go one by one through them. But anyway, I find this one, like that's what I mostly rely on my interpretation, kind of understanding of the models. So here, Matheson lithology, again, an hour seismic transect that goes all the way around here north to the south. You might see the faint in here. So I put the density model there, and I bring the density model in. Here is the high, I'm making an isovolume of high density values. You can see where those values are sitting in the transect. Here is our 3D resistivity model that we have. And here you'll realize that I put the hot colors for the conductive region. So anywhere we see a red color, that means conductive. That's kind of flipped the axis, but that's very norm for the resistivity models. And here I'm just showing isovolume of high conductivities, or anywhere that was low resistivity for the Matheson area again. And this is our susceptibility model that we have. And again, here I'm showing a high susceptibility value. So I'm just kind of isovalue showing that what are the high values. So here is the median value segmentation. So all these values, like there is no overlap. Like this volume fully completely colored with these ones, and there is no overlap between them. So in the next 8 slides, when you see several iteration of these things at different clusters, you will realize they're individually like they're exclusive of each other, and nothing is overlaps on top of each other. Here is like how our low density, low resistivity, and low susceptibility model looks like for the Matheson. Going back, low density, low resistivity, and high susceptibility here. These are the colors, the regions in the horizontally and vertically. We have that 3D model showing there. Here's our low density, high resistivity, and low susceptibility, and low density, high resistivity, high susceptibility model. Because these are low density, I ignore these things. I really want to focus on the high density areas, and I'm thinking those would be more mineral prospective. So going here, I starting with the high density. Now we have low resistivity, which is conductive, but we have low susceptibility here. And then moving on, so just like I put this geology in here, flipping between those. The most, like I think what I feel like that should be some good representation of where we should look for minerals for regions that they have high density, low resistivity, which means they were conductive in our models, and high susceptibility. I'm a bit like reluctant on using the high susceptibility as a measure for such thing, but nevertheless, anywhere clusters that we get 5 and 6, meaning either high density or low resistivity areas, I would be like more intrigued to go look around those regions for mineral prospectivity. So going up again gets high density, then high resistivity region with low susceptibility, and that's what we get. So just looking at what's the difference K-means clustering given to us. Again, here K-means giving me these 4 clusters, which sometimes they correlate with some of the geology on the surface, but nevertheless, it's a bit hard to really come up with like what each region represents. Some of them separate nicely, some of them doesn't separate in the physical properties. But there might be some ground truths in these models. And also in the, going back again, here's the ORCLUS clustering and the kind of clusters that we get from the ORCLUS. That's what I feel that we came out of that. So just, I won't go that much into those clustering results, but I will so far working on collecting all these things, but I'm hoping there would be still some insight will come out of those clustering methods. So here we have the geology, and I have a seismic survey going in here. So this is our Matheson seismic survey that I just projected in here. So I project that those 2 clusters in the median values, segmentation 5 and 6, means high density and high conductivity. So these are the regions that they have high density and conductivity, and the orange ones are low susceptibility, and yellow, like orange ones are high susceptibility, and the yellow is a low susceptibility. Nevertheless, anything that we see in this region have a high density and high conductivity. So just taking the geology of there, it's very interesting to see how this, is there any indication of this volume on the seismic? So what I do, I project these things on our seismic data, and I can see that orange and yellow color they show in here, which if I go really look at in how they said that we have this dim zone of reflectivity that pushes all the way from mid-crust all the way to surface. And that's like pretty much closely matches with this orange and white, the high, let's say hotter colors, high density values, which has its own separation with other physical properties, which might have some insight to mineralization. And whole point is, in the 3D models, now we see how they extend from seismic out there. So once we see some correlations, we can predict that might be extending to south in here, or it's going to the west on that side, and we can follow these trends and maybe mark them as a good areas for mineral prospectivity. So having done that, I put all these models together. I'm just going to show all of them together right now. So this is the Abitibi part, Swayze, Matheson, Larder Lake, Royan, and Cobalt. So these are their surface lithology. Again, notations are in here, what they represent. So this is just a 2D projection, and I'm looking at the cluster number 6, which for my median value segmentation shows me the high density, conductive, and high susceptibility areas. So just flipping between these two, we can easily see how this correlates to these volcanic units. And it's very interesting, this mineralized zone in the Royan that comes to the Larder Lake has this trend in here that following there. And then we have some of these anomalies that sometimes sit in here, and there might be some ground truths there to look for prospectivity, like to just go search there for minerals. That's a naive geophysics opinion at this point, but something that comes in it. Again, these are 3D models. I was showing the 2D. So if we put these again, surface geology on top of them and how they look like, so you can see there's the variation in the depths. There's like dips. This model, that anomaly that I showed you in the Royan, looks like it's mostly in the deep, and then the closer to the gets to the north comes to the surface. But then here is like in the shallow parts, it's not there. And again, this is all the clusters there, the same colors. Going to the Wabigoon province, these are now the 4 transects that I finished: Rainy River, Dryden, Atikokan, and the Sturgeon. And that's how the distribution of those high high density, low resistivity, and high susceptibility will look like for the Wabigoon. And again, this is their 3D distribution. And then I put the geology on top just for comparison if anybody wants later to look at them. And that's the final color. So just by, I feel like now that I have two areas, I have the Wabigoon and I have the Abitibi, by just looking at the texture and the number of colors I see and the extent of them, I see some kind of obvious difference with them. I haven't been able to pinpoint exactly what that could be, but looks like there's some differences. But just if I look at specifically high density and low resistivity conductive zones in the Abitibi versus Wabigoon, and how they interact with each other, this high susceptibility and low susceptibility, the orange and yellow color, like there might be some relationship between the extent and volume of these colors in here in the Wabigoon versus the Abitibi that I need to do some quantitative analysis on these once I'm done with all the transects, but there might be some insight that pops up on these differences. So I just concluding here, just for conclusion, I would say we use the 3D density, resistivity, and susceptibility models from metal earth transects, and I take them all and I regularly sample them into grid of 500 by 500 by 500 meter. So I have a 3D cube that their intervals are all in 500 meters. And then I use two unsupervised learning algorithms, K-means and ORCLUS, to separate the data, and that there are some correlations, some meaningful matching with the surface geology on these one that needs more analysis. But for ease of my analysis and making sure that I'm really looking at the right, high, and lows, I did some medium value segmentation of my normalized physical properties, and I was able to make 8 clusters that correlate to high and lows of density, resistivity, and susceptibility, which in a sense provided I think, a good insight to what different differences we can see between these two regions. So again, I see some differences in relative extent and volume of medium value segments in the Abitibi and Wabigoon regions. So for by just the basic first attempt, like where could be, we can look for minerals, I highlighted anywhere with the high density and high conductivity zones that on all 3D models, that they might be some indicators of the regions with high mineral prospectivity. And the 3D physical property models and all these things are being used by our data analytics peoples, that they're using supervised learnings and many other machine learning algorithms to match these with the non-mineral deposits and come out with the data. So here I thank all the Metal Earth people and staff, data analytics group people, and all the people that they generated 3D models and they provided for me, and all these softwares that I'm using to make these plots and analysis. And these are my references. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Mostafa. We have time for a question. Okay, Mostafa, how can we better integrate the seismic 3D?
Seismic to 3D?
Yeah.
The seismic is like the whole point. Let me go to the seismic in here. Oh, I went too much. Okay, here. So coming in here. So seismic, our seismic is a very narrow area, and then the way that I am we do this 3D analysis, and the best thing I can do at the moment, just project whatever clusters we have from any of these, like medium value or ORCLUS, and then try to see we can find any, like going between these, any areas with the dim reflections or some faulting and stuff that really matches with this segments and clusters. And once we see such a thing, and we pretty much be able to kind of make a guess what that layers or stuff are, and then we can extend, like, because we have this 3D extending out of this 3D seismic, the single 2D line, we might be able to push all those information that we just gained at this seismic transect with all the models that projected there, and we can extend it to other regions and maybe expand it. But I think that's all at this point I think we can do. It's just because our seismic is very, I guess, narrow, I guess, just the 2D.
Okay. Eric has a question. He's got his hand up.
Yes, well, thanks, Mostafa. I really enjoyed that presentation. But I have a question about the method for clustering. You've used those normalized values of the resistivity, the susceptibility, and the density. Have you considered using another kind of metric, like a principal component analysis or an independent component analysis, and look at either patterns or clusters using a metric like that, and see if that might highlight or isolate some of these preferred patterns?
I think I provided all these normalized, like the density values or everything that we have for our correlation pool. I haven't done personally myself, but I think Hemming has done some analysis on that. He might be talking about those, but I think some of our people, they tried those principal component analysis, but I haven't done it myself. That's clustering. So I just done these two methods, and since I got so much confused with these, I just right now done this ones. But what I have done with all these models, I have on the same grids, I have saved these normalized values, the original resistivity values, all these clusters, and I have the shape value that I provide for our data analytic people, and they can just extract them, and I just right away apply any methods that they want on them. So the most of my energy so far is spent on making sure that I can put these on the similar grid, I can normalize them, and I can provide them in a basic format that everybody can just take the data and apply those analyses.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
David has a question.
Yeah, Mostafa, I guess I'm following up on Ross's question a little bit. In your Matheson model, your clusters 4 and 5 were the ones that you were sort of preferring. And of course, having worked on that transect, I'm immediately trying to relate those to the rock units. And so they're actually the ones that you're focusing on are generally the greenstones. And here, in this case, it would be the Tisdale and the Kidd Monroe in the north. So I was wondering if it might be useful, to help the geologists, if nothing else, relate to your preferred volumes. To try to correlate your clusters instead of using just a number or a physical property, to actually assign it a known rock unit name and see how well that holds up.
Yeah, that's something I have in my mind. So I take all these different rock units, assign a number, they will be on the surface, but I will be able to somehow take all these numbers and correlate with the one. Let's say I have 8 numbers on the top, and each of them correlate to each of these lithologies, and I will be able to find if there is any correlation between these to any lithology on the surface to those models. So right now, by my eyesight, I see that they're correlating with volcanic units, that, as you mentioned, but there is definitely some quantitative thing that can be done there. So I had in my mind doing that, but so far, I guess once I'm done with the Geraldton and the Malartic and Sudbury ones, I would like to do lots of those analyses as well. Just take a surface, make a number for these lithologies, and do that correlations with that too. Good idea, in fact.
All right. Well, thank you,
Jeff, I just have a comment, if you allow me.
Sure.
Yeah. So just because this is 3-dimensional data, you might ask how we are incorporating in our digital integration models, which we could now call. What we're doing is taking different levels Mostafa has produced for us and keeping each level as a predictor map. So that takes care of the 3-dimensional aspect of the data, which we're comparing to the location of known say, orogenic gold deposits and the non-deposits. So that's the way we're integrating some of this in a 3D sense to help us analyze for our digital integration models. So.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks.